Hey guys, welcome to Imagination TV. My name is Paris Lee and I will be your host for today. I will introduce you to my co-host, Siaka now.
Thank you, Paris. Everyone, welcome to Imagination TV, this episode. I wish you could see me, how excited I am and how this is a privilege to be co-hosting with Paris. But yeah, we just had a storm before the show began, and it's all dark. My name is Sheka, as my co-host has introduced me, and what makes me who I am. It's been a number of things, but now it's my beautiful 5 months daughter. Today's topic is unlikely connections. At AIME, we're building a social network for good, the imagination, a place where you connect with who you, not who you know or what you know, but who you don't know and what you don't know. We are asking what it looks like when you bring collective intelligence of outside the margins to the margins and begin to make unlikely connections. We are making unlikely connections with brave thinkers from outside the margins who are dissatisfied with how the network of today are perpetuating inequality. People from every space who can imagine a world where networks exist for the betterment of the people who exist in them and the world around them. We will be speaking to people who have built networks and talking to students as well, the shapers of tomorrow, about the networks they would like to see shaping the future. As we chat today, everybody on the panel should feel free to jump in to add and discuss with each other as we go. Let's encourage the free flow of ideas and embrace failure like an old friend. If you have any thoughts or questions in the audience, throw them in the YouTube chat and we will move on with the conversation. I'll throw it back to my co-host, Paris, to get this going. Everyone else, good to have you here and excited for the unlikely connections we're about to make today.
Thanks, Siaka. So I'm going to introduce now our panel of people that we have to share with you guys and show all of their different skills and what they have in the network. So I'll start with Clyde. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Paris. Great intros, both of you. My name's Clyde Fernandez. As I mentioned earlier in the introduction when I was talking to the panelists, I'm a dad, I'm a partner. I also work for an organization called Salesforce. My whole focus is on how to actually leverage these unlikely connections and how to help people, especially the most vulnerable. So really, really grateful, Paris, for being invited onto this panel, distinguished list of guests, and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Clyde. I'll throw it over to Laura now. Introduce yourself.
Well, g'day everyone. My name's Laura and I'm coming to you from an organisation called Orange Sky, and our mission is to positively connect communities of vulnerable people, in particular people experiencing homelessness all across Australia and New Zealand. And I'm honoured to be here today. I love what AIME do, and I think excited for some really collaborative and disruptive conversation today. So thanks for having me, Paris, and the AIME team.
No worries, anytime. I'll throw it over to Abia now.
Thanks, Paris. Lee. So my name's Avia. I'm a third-year actuarial studies student at UNSW. Although I don't have as much experience as most of these people on the panel, like all their amazing experience and advice, I definitely want to put in a student's perspective in connections, because I think it's really important to understand from a student's perspective, because that's where we start from and that's where we try building our connections first. And I'm excited to be here and excited to hear everyone. So that's me.
Thanks for being on the show. I'll next throw it over to Nico.
Thanks, Paris Lee, and fantastic to be here. My name is Nico Plowman. I'm a Vedic meditation teacher and the co-founder of Insight Timer, which is a 20 million registered user meditation network. People don't realize, but the parent company is actually Insight Network. And maybe 10,000 meditation teachers, 10,000 yoga teachers, and a groups function of some 20,000 groups. So we have, whether we with all those dynamics of network and connections. So I look forward to sharing with everyone today. Thanks.
Thanks, Nico. I'll give it over to Jake now.
Hey guys, hey Paris Lee, thanks for having me. My name's Jake Duke. I'm a sports reporter for Fox Sports. I'm a proud Gamilaroi man from Moree. I am now living in Sydney, but I also do a podcast called Refuse to Lose Podcast, which is all about athletes who have great stories and stories that have been tough stories. That impart a lot of wisdom that are important for people to hear, I think, and we try to tell those stories on the podcast, and also speak to athletes about what they want to do in the world and how they want to change the world with their profile and their platform. So I think it's kind of important with what we're talking about today. So thank you so much for having me, and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you all for introducing yourself and telling us a bit about yourself. I will now go into asking you guys a few questions. You're more than welcome to answer or throw it over to someone else if you think they have more to talk about on it. But the first question I will throw out is, what does it take to build a network of unlikely connections? So you can have a think about that and jump on when you're ready with an answer. I'll repeat the question again. What does it take to build a network of unlikely connections?
I'll just jump in and say, just from being in uncomfortable situations, you have to really put yourself out of your own limits and be in uncomfortable situations. And I think Jade had a perfect phrase yesterday that she said, you have to be like interesting people, people that you're interested in as well. And sorry, Jade, I saw your line, but that basically means that if you want to reach those interesting people, you have to really jump out of your own comfortability, and you have to see and not just assume that people aren't interested in you, because they might be at the end of the day, and you'll never know if you never try. So I think you just have to really push yourself out of your limits and everything. So that's me.
And I'm thinking about what you said earlier about all this wisdom. I disagree with you. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, because actually it's original thought that matters. And I love what you just said, because for me, courage is one of the key things. And you talked about, growth. And there's a saying I love using, which I use on myself a lot, which is, there's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's seldom comfort in the growth zone. But it's okay. Embrace the uncomfortableness and learn to become comfortable as much as you can with being uncomfortable. And if you can do that, it's amazing. I think about the panelists right now. Amazing connections already. I get this huge opportunity to meet with you and everybody else, and these are some really unlikely connections which I think are going to endure, because I see interest in all of you. So I'm with you about, it's all about courage and getting out of your comfort zone.
For me, I think.
Sorry,
you go, Nico. So you go.
Oh, thanks, Jake. Yeah, that's when we think about unlikely connections, there's always going to be a common point, given that we are all of this one, humanity is obviously ultimately connected at a much deeper level, but the idea that we can look across an aisle or whatever it might be to find a common thread, there is relevance that exists. Even if people have opposing views, I can speak to a father about daughters or about children. So there'll always be something. It just depends upon how open and how much courage we have to find that thread. On the surface layer, some people may feel that there's not enough in common to have a connection, but of course there is, and that's just even a very basic human instinct. Over to you, Jake.
I was going to touch on something very similar, Nico, but I think another thing to add on to that is empathy. I think it's an understanding when you talk about common ground and forming unlikely connections. It's also about having empathy for someone else's struggles, someone else's journey through life, and that's how when you're finding that common ground is to, just because I don't understand it or I haven't experienced it myself, I'm willing to listen and understand that it might have affected you differently, and I'm okay with that. I think just in my line of work and working when I have conversations with athletes, they come from difficult backgrounds. You have people reach out and say, "Oh, I judged him because of what I saw of him in the media or whatever." But when then they hear their story and understand where they come from, they might have a bit more empathy, and that forms them to make a connection with these people, and then they see them in a different light. So I think that's important as well.
I might jump in and just say, I think the couple of thoughts that were popping into my mind is just around the power of active listening and how critical that is when you are forming unlikely connections. So how do you create a space where people feel heard and listened to, and like you said, Jake, not judged? And that takes a level of vulnerability on your side as well to say, actually, I'm not going to put forward my perspective, or I'm just going to sit back for a little bit. So I think that can be really powerful in creating those unlikely connections as well.
Yeah, I love all the different things that were thrown around with the active listening, the empathy, understanding. Like, awesome, guys. Thank you so much. Off all of that, I would then like to ask you, what do you think a healthy network looks like? Whether that be within the people you interact with or just the network overall. What do you think a healthy network looks like?
I could probably kick this one off as I guess the custodian, and I guess my brother and I feel like custodians of something which is much bigger than all of us, but there's an idea that networks can be somewhat created whereby people can be free to be themselves, and we use the word, it's the Disneyland version of a network. And then there's networks which people consider to be very vibrant because you can say what you want, and that's the public square network, which might be a Twitter. And so navigating our way through, let's call those social networks, can actually be reflected in terms of all networks. Where is it that people understand what it is that their responsibility is? Because it's a right to be able to communicate. It comes with respect. And then where does responsibility come into that? And it's an idea that people who are somewhat the not the adjudicators, but at least the custodians of those, create parameters and a place where people can feel safe enough to share without feeling that they're obviously going to be, criticised. And we see a lot of that across all, from very end of the spectrum, left and right at the moment.
Just on that as well, Nico, when you talk about networks, and I think about social media as a network that I have to use a lot in my line of work, it's about how you relate to the network too. Like, there's always going to be people that will put negative things in there and make it not a positive space. And I think you've also got to be so mindful of the way you relate to it, the way you engage with it. Whether it's turning off notifications, not being too glued to it, not reading. Not a good piece of advice I always found is, if you read the hype, then you should read the negativity as well, or maybe just don't read any of it, because about yourself, because if people, in my job, it's a public job where I do things on television, so people can have direct access to saying things about you or things that you've said. So I just think to make things a positive network for you, you just have to be really careful the way you engage with it, and just shut it off if you have to. That's my take on that kind of, especially the social media platforms of things.
The thing I'd add to all of that is, if I think about a healthy network, I look for diversity and inclusion. As a saying, diversity is a fact. We all know it now, but inclusion is still a choice. So I think about inclusion safety. So how do we make sure we create? I heard, I think it was Nico mentioned the word safety before. How do we create safe environments so people can feel safe to join? So that inclusion, safety is super important, and this lends itself to the whole bigger space around a thing called psychological safety. How do we create spaces where we can feel safe to join, feel safe to learn, feel safe to challenge? And the diversity angle for me is diversity of thinking. I don't want to be an echo chamber. I don't want to just connect with people who are exactly like me, because then I just get this positive reinforcement of what I already know. I actually want different points of views. And I love it. When I was a bit younger, I couldn't handle it because I thought my view was right. And then as you get older, you start realizing that, wisdom is actually knowing what you don't know, and actually leaning into it. So for me, diversity, inclusion, and the whole notion of safety becomes really important in a network.
Awesome. I love all the ideas that were just thrown out, like the responsibility it comes with engaging with people and always making sure you are staying positive and having that connection one-on-one with people, but with people that you're not so always like going to go to, like just different people. I really like that. And talking on all of that, what would be, the next question would be is, what is broken within the networks you guys work in that you would want to alter or progress to be something better and something more positive?
I might go. Thanks, Parasley. Great question. I don't know if it's broken, but I think a lot of my life at the moment is thinking about, like, what does a network look like in a COVID-19 world? So for people who are experiencing homelessness or who are disconnected and can't isolate and be in lockdown, actually, how do you foster and create community? And they may not have access to, different resources like Zoom or like social networks. So how do you facilitate those connections so that people don't get disconnected? So it's sort of about, like, for me, I was thinking about the notion of how do you reimagine what that looks like, or reimagine a network in a world where maybe face-to-face doesn't work anymore or virtually doesn't work. And so how do we actually go even broader than that and do that for people who can't connect remotely? So maybe that's a challenge to this audience. If you can think about it in that way, or Chaka, for example, you've lost access to power this morning. Imagine if that was, the reality like it is for so many people around the world, where they don't get that access to technology, which we use in a pandemic. So that's what I was thinking about a little bit then when you asked that excellent question, Paris Lee.
I'll just continue on with Laura's point. I think she made such a good point. I feel bad because I'm using my own privilege, and like with all the people that have gone through those problems, are still going through those problems. The students' problems in like such a privileged environment feel really minor and small. But just to put into students' perspective, a big challenge that we might have is just this schism between corporate world, especially in like the business world that I'm trying to get into, the schism between corporate people and the students, and having that that sense of comfortability and safe space where students can talk to these higher ups and they actually listen. As Laura has said, has mentioned before, active listening is really important, not just for the students between connections, but for those higher ups to listen to us, because they might not give us the time of day. They might not listen to us, especially during this COVID time where spots and positions are very, very limited, and finding your way through this big world and this big corporate place is really challenging. And also having like people who are extremely competitive as well. So that just ties in with creating a network that is safe, but it can also be very like toxic, especially if someone is going through the same position as you, wants to do the same thing as you. And just having like a relationship with not only the people that are on the same level as you, but as like people who are higher ups as well. So I think that level and balance of equity is really important, and just respect. And a lot of places don't give that, which is really discouraging for students as well. So I think that's one of the biggest problems that a student might have, especially within my firsthand experience of that. Yeah.
I thought a bit on those comments, and it's probably just jumping along a bit. But of course, as networks are started and created and evolve, and I've said the words before that sometimes a network's birthed in a certain way and it becomes your baby, and then of course it turns into a teenager. And just as I was saying before, I had to get my hoodie out of a big dirty pile of washing this morning. We ultimately bring the baby into the world, and then as networks and those things start to create and evolve and they grow, they do start to come with all of those challenges. And so it becomes a very it's a sensitive game. You let it go into the world, and then you also need to sometimes a little bit of discipline, a little bit of structure, and then you let it have to go. And so there's a little, there's a constant treading along and balancing of how it is that we allow networks to maintain their natural dynamics, which is the reason people came in the first place, with also ensuring that they can that we can create these environments of, let's call it, safety and respect and those things. So it is a challenge. It is an absolute challenge to bring networks into the world in a way that we might consider to be making the contributions and relevant. And if they don't, then I guess they also start to if they lose the relevance, then they actually will they will crumble as well. So cause and effect and all that stuff. Yeah.
Paris Lee, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask a question, but I wanted to ask Nicholas, when's the right time to leave a network or let go of a network? I think, or if it is a broken network, to say, actually, you know what, it's time I go, in your experience.
So I have not been on social media. I have a private Instagram account, which I go on maybe once a week to check messages, but I've now not been on social media for nearly 18 months. No Twitter, no LinkedIn, no nothing, no Facebook. And I made a personal decision. They were not environments where I enjoyed. I didn't find that there was much for me to share, and I just didn't find it charming at all. So I left them. And I started a little WhatsApp group with a small group of people who I'd taught to meditate, and that is now a private WhatsApp group. It's got hundreds of people in it. We share information. It's wonderful, and it grows because people get invited to it very carefully. So on a personal network level, I just decided to do very little. I have a one-page website. And so it's a natural network that is that is evolving slowly, and it just, there's a quality to it. We can talk about networks based on quality score of users. That's what we do. And so if if there's a bunch of people in that network and you've advertised them or you've pushed them or forced them or coerced them to even be part of that network, then the quality of their engagement is low. If people have opted to be part of that network based on what someone else said, or just because they came across it in a natural way, the quality of their engagement is high. So we can start to see where some of these networks lose quality. And at that point, we vote with our feet. And that's fine. Cycle, off it goes. Maybe we join another network. And so we'll see cycles through. But I think once we just feel that discomfort, we don't want to be there, let's leave.
Just to jump on that topic quickly.
Yep.
Sorry. For my generation, I think we are all so connected with media, especially social media. So having that downtime and having that time to actually step away and be who we are without the comments and the media throwing things at us is probably really challenging for some people. Like, I don't find it very challenging to jump off social media. I can have those breaks, but there is those times where that's the first thing I would do in the morning. I would roll over, get my phone, check my social media, check all my notifications, and sometimes it would just create that negative vibe for me and that negative energy to then start my day. And sometimes I would start my day so negative because of what the network has put out there for me to actually see and to take in, and how to start my day off. So lately I have been like doing a journal. So instead of going on my phone and social media and the network and all the cloud stuff, I'm doing a journal instead. So it's not actually screen time. It's like just something I can do to start off my day actually really well. So I really liked what you said, Nico, about knowing when to stop and when social media and the network is actually good and it has a good quality in your life. But I'll pass it to Jake now. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's just similar. And what I was saying before about, you know, you the way you engage with it is how it affects you. But at the same time, you know, these things can have really positive measurements, like when you're trying to put something out there and have it grow organically. I think the key is to using it to its strengths, and then knowing when it's, you know, probably time to disable comments on this, or, you know, or these people aren't engaging with it positively, so block them. But I think if you're using it in the right way, as Nico said, something can grow organically, that, you know, and something can grow organically using Instagram, using Twitter. Things, people can see it, they just share it, they share it, they share it, and then other people can catch on to it and really resonate with it. So I think it's just about finding that fine line about where things are good and then where to pull back. Because yeah, it's just everything, right? Everything has an equal and opposite reaction. So many things are so many positives, but then they can have negatives. So it's just about the way you relate to it and the way you make it work for you, I think.
Paris, I was going to pick up on a word that you use. You use the word energy. That's what I use to measure what I contribute to and what I move away from. If I think about people or processes or places, they typically contribute or detract from my energy. And one thing I've recognized now is, end of the day, it's about my energy that I've got to manage, and energy can get, you know, eroded very quickly, and then you're less good for the people that are around you. That's important to you. So I think about, and I don't think in terms of digital versus non-digital or social versus non-social. I just think about energy. Is what I'm doing taking energy away from me? And if it is, over a sustained period of time, I go, you know, how can I afford to do that? Can I afford to keep using that energy on that? Because I'm notorious. I've got a very addictive personality. So as soon as I get on YouTube, you know, initially I'm starting to, you know, doing research on cryptocurrency, and all of a sudden I'm looking at, you know, sheep jumping over a cliff, over a fence, right? Where did that happen? So I think about energy. I think about, how do I conserve my energy for the things that matter the most? So if it's detracting from energy, think about moving away from it. If it's adding to your energy, note it down so that when you're not feeling good, go to those things, whatever they are, people, places, or processes.
And I was thinking, Clyde, when you were talking about that, then so much of that is about self-awareness. So it's actually, how do you cultivate self-awareness to know, actually, my energy's good here or my energy's bad there? And then knowing, just like you said, Nicholas, when do you use the law of 2 feet to walk out? Do you know what I mean? Or leave it, like you did, Parasley, with moving to journaling. So I think like cultivating self-awareness to support you to create positive connections or communities or networks. Maybe there's something in that. I don't know. I'll leave that for the team to think about.
Yeah, I think what you said, Laura, just hit the spot, because when I think about self-awareness and accountability, like a person, like for me personally, I am quite outspoken and honest. But as I think a person said empathy. Empathy is really important as well, and having that emotional intelligence. So even if I'm like honest and brutal and like I want it some sort of way, if you can't take your own criticism and if you can't take other people's criticism on you, you can never grow. And I think that's where accountability and self-awareness is really important, to cultivate important relationships as well. Like you can't have yes people always on your side. You need those type of people to tell you, hey, Abia, you're like, this is getting out of hand. Like you need to do it a different way or something, like this isn't working, etc. And I think that's really important as well. Like taking in the criticism, and if you're saying criticism yourself, you have to like say it positively, and it just has to work both ways. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's awesome, guys. Thanks so much for all of your input. That's actually really touched me in so many different ways you don't understand. I just wanted to ask, does any one of our panelists have any questions for you guys, like within the panel? Is there anything you guys want to know about your own networks that you guys all have, or is it something that we've spoken about that you would like to ask each other about?
I guess the question for the panelists is, we've all got networks. So how do we share them? How do we share them in an unlikely way? What are some practical steps we as individuals can take? And I mean, all of us, you too, Paris, you've got a network that, is very powerful, right? And so how do we not think about it, but actually move to action to actually share some of those networks and so that it could form those unlikely connections?
I'll jump in. I think that's it's a good question. There's a wonderful book, and regardless of age, a man called David Hawkins wrote a book called Power versus Force, and the idea that things that we force, are essentially weaker. Things that come from natural place of power continue just to build that inner strength. And so, I think when we see that a network is adopting its own lovely organic qualities, then there's a trust to that. And you think this network's doing just what it needs to do, you see, and it will attract the people that it needs to attract. And so trusting the timing of these things is the balance, as opposed to also then saying, well, and I love this. I mean, it was my network knowing Dan Single that he texted me last week and said, hey, jump on a call next week. I was like, yeah, great, fantastic, beautiful. Now, I know AIME, I know Dan. He said, I think you'll like it. And I'm sitting here talking with you, and immediately we have a sharing of network, and it's just happened very naturally. And so I think that's also the other idea, is that we can actually trust the quality as they start to interconnect. All of a sudden, network, intra-network, and we keep doing that, And so I think to answer that, it's like staying open and awake and aware to when networks are actually opening up. And it was just a text message of Dan, hey mate, love hearts all over it, fantastic, woohoo, jump on a call, and here we are. And so it was more just being spontaneous and instinctive and trusting to move and say yes to everything, and networks will grow. I think if I was tired and this and that and too many things on and turning around, I'm going to be like, oh, maybe I'm too busy. But I think if, once again, back to Laura, what you were saying, if we're cultivating a conscious state or a capacity to enjoy things and be broad and to say yes to everything, then of course unnaturally our network's just going to start to attracting all sorts of different opportunities as we're all sharing today.
I think it's about the passion too, and your passion for what you're doing automatically opens you up to those things. And I think if you believe what your platform or whatever it is that you do in your life, it comes across to people, and that people see the genuineness that you have with something, and that makes them more open to wanting to work with you. You can't force someone to like what you do or force them to listen to what you put out there or watch what you put out there. But if they see that it's coming from a place of love and things that, that someone that's very passionate about, then it opens up more networks of people to see this person believes what they're doing, and I want to be involved with them, and I want work with them on that, or I want them to be involved in something I'm doing because I can see that they're genuine. So I think that's the best thing you can do is in trying to share your network or spread or connect with others is just be passionate about what you're doing, and that will resonate with people.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. I would just like to quickly throw it over to Siaka. If listening on to all of this that we have spoken about today, what is a 10-second message you would want to share out to our audience as a final wrap-up message?
Thank you, Paris Lee. Thank you, everyone on the panel. What an amazing conversation about unlikely connections. And in 10 seconds, one thing I'd say to the kids out there and the youngsters listening, them be like, go for those connections. Always try to connect with human beings. The only thing that has gotten human beings evolving and surviving since the beginning of the human race. Connect, 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 connect. That's the message, Paris. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. That was amazing. And I think that really goes within our topic of, what was our topic again? The unlikely connections. Because connecting, that's the only way we can make those unlikely connections more of a powerful thing to share out to society, and having the safety and creating that safety for society to connect to other people, and also knowing like the responsibilities of being positive and having all those aspects in giving to the network. So I would just like to say thank you, everybody, for jumping on, all of our panelists. They're amazing. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. And the amazing conversations that we just had with all of you. So now we will wrap up the show, but thank you all. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me as your host as well.